Howdy folks, welcome back to the Forged Home. I'm Brett McAfee and today I'm going to show you how I made this simple 8x12 pier block deck and finished it using a technique called Yakisugi. Let's get to it.
I love my little workshop, but the area in front of it has been in a bad state for a while. There's this steep grade created by a natural wash and lots of, let's say, building material left over from the previous owner. First things first, I cleaned up the surrounding area with this heavy magnet and got rid of all the hidden nails and bolts buried in the sand. I continued the cleanup by towing a work cart around and breaking up these large concrete pours left over from what I think are fence posts. After some hefty shoveling, grading, and raking, I used the concrete pieces to build a retaining wall so I could pour gravel from the entrance of the property back to the deck area. This little driveway project helped me with moving the sand and soil around enough to shift that natural wash further away from the workshop, giving me the ability to drive the deck material back to the shop, and it'll be super useful in the future. You know, sometimes a deck build requires a landscape overhaul. After all that, it was time to set the first pier block. I used a nice straight 2x4 to get a rough position, using the existing concrete slab as a reference, and started digging. Each 8-inch wide pier block needed to be placed on top of 4 to 6 inches of gravel to avoid any shifting in the sand. And then I used a wide level to check both directions before adding more gravel and raking back the sand to fill in the gaps. I moved on to the corner, measuring away from the center, and repeated the process for setting that block. Double checking the distance to the concrete slab, and using that trusty 2x4 to check for level between the two blocks. Perfectly level. And then I realized the first block was not meant to be in the center, so I reset it. Hey, at least I caught it early. Moving on. I set the next corner block and made a reference mark on the 2x4 that mirrored the overhang from the block closest to the workshop. That way I could avoid having to measure for every remaining block on that edge. Just check the reference, good to go. I also made a reference mark for the center row of blocks, same deal. Once all of the pier blocks were set in place, I brought in the 2x6 red cedar to double check that everything was square and level.
Before I start joining everything together, I'm going to throw some boiled linseed oil on this surface and then turn it over so it becomes the bottom of our joist. I'd rather do it now than get to the end of the project and realize I totally forgot to do it and then, you know, I'd have to lift the entire deck. I'm not doing that.
While those boards were soaking up that oil, I started prepping the two longer horizontal pieces that'll finish out that frame.
Now because I want my corners to be nice and strong, I am going to use a Simpson strong tie L bracket for the interior corner. I often find that the most difficult part of framing something this large, say on the ground instead of a nice flat work surface, is just holding the corner in place while you set your screws. Here's a little trick I use. Let's say this is the corner you really need to hold in place while you work on something else. Hopefully you got some clamps laying around in your shop. I like to hang one off the end of my material, and if I need to hold this in place, I can scoot it right in and lay it in the clamp. I could shim it up if I really wanted to get it perfect, but for the purposes of what I'm doing, this is good enough. To attach the plate to the corner of the wood, I'm going to be using these stainless steel metal to wood screws. Here's why. Not all screws are created equal, and if I were to use a normal decking screw, it would have this flared head and it wouldn't really seat the plate against the wood and be nice and flush. You can see on the screw made specifically to attach metal to wood, it sits flush against the edge of the plate. It'll give us a really nice connection to the wood.
I installed all of the corner brackets and continued checking square just in case anything shifted during the process. Then I installed the joist hanger brackets for the interior pieces, making sure to check for square as well as being flush to that top edge. A couple of screws, a couple of nails, and repeat.
I I gave the entire frame a nice coat of boiled linseed oil and let it soak in overnight. And now I get to do the fun part, which is the actual deck boards. Whoa. Oh no! Well, that was hilarious, and I'm glad I caught it on camera. Anyway, take two. Now that all the prep work's done in terms of the driveway, the pier blocks, the squaring, the leveling, everything, now I get to start working on the actual decking boards, which are Cedar 2x6s, same as the frame and joists. Now I know I could just cover them in boiled linseed oil, slap them in place, call the project done. That's not how we do things here. I'm gonna turn it up just a notch and do a finishing technique that I've actually been practicing over the last couple of years because I love the look. And if you were paying attention, it's actually right behind me. This is actually an old cedar plank that I scavenged out here, and I flame blackened it and oiled it so that I could have a nice visual texture going on behind me in my workshop. Now you may have seen this technique referred to as Yakisugi bun, but it's actually called Yakisugi. But Brett, why are you calling it that instead of Yakisugi bun? That's what I've seen all over the internet and my Pinterest boards and YouTube, and I've even used it in the past because I thought that's what it was called. The sugi in the word refers to the cypress, or in my case cedar, that I'll be using, and the yaki refers to the cooking or burning of it. Yakisugi, not Yakisugi bun. Look it up on the internet. There's a Wikipedia article about the mistranslation. Go do your research. Not only do I love the way this looks, it's also functional. We get an amazing weather seal and finish without using paint or chemical sealers or whatever. I don't like that stuff. Let's get to it. Now I've lost my shade, but I want to give you a quick rundown on what the process is. It's not super complicated, and for the purpose of this demonstration, I'll just be using one of these hand torches and a scrap piece of my cedar. You're not going to be able to see the flame very well in the sunlight, but we're just applying enough heat to char the outside layer of the cedar, and because I'm using 2x6 material, I have less of a risk of this thing banana peeling, but the thinner you go, the more warping might happen with the application of the heat. I have noticed that around knot holes, because the wood is more dense here, whatever the sap or resin that's in that knot hole will tend to smoke or light on fire more so than the rest of the wood. And don't overcook that, because it'll probably split everything around it. Once I've got a nice deep char, I'm just going to take a brush and brush off all of that soot that's been created on the outside. And then we'll take a little bit of our boiled linseed oil. Because we've dried out the wood, you'll probably notice that the oil soaks in super fast. So once it soaks in one time, I'll probably give it another layer. Man, that looks nice. It's gonna look amazing on this deck when it's done. Now, if you fall in love with this Yakisugi technique the way that I did, you'll realize that one of these hand torches, while great, may not be enough if you start working on bigger projects, which is why I got this. Say hello to the Red Dragon. Most big box stores carry these. It's a lawn and garden torch. It works the same way as the hand torch does, except for that we get a larger flame and it'll speed up our process a little bit more. They're about $60 or $70. If you like it, go get it. I repeated the process of charring, brushing, oiling, and wiping down before installing the first few boards. I made sure to check the overhang, the board and frame angles, as well as the centerline pilot holes using a speed square before setting the first screws. Once I had the first board set, I could use my trusty square to align the second board, and then use it as an 1/8" spacer between them. Easy peasy. After the first couple of boards were down, I was able to cruise. Doing all of the prep work and triple checking myself made this final process a breeze. Aside from the occasional warped board, which was easily dealt with using the speed square and the iJessup style foot clamps. I gave everything a final wipe down to remove any excess oil, and my new deck was done. Well, that's it, and I'm really happy with how the deck turned out. It was a simple project using minimal tools, and it'll add some much needed work/hang space in front of my shop. If you're thinking about building your own or using that wood burning technique on one of your projects, let me know down in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time on Forged Home.